Hello everyone, this is Poohead189, and today is a special day. No, this is not a clickbait video. Today we are actually going to see who would win in a fight. Tien, otherwise called Tenshinhan or Tenshinhan, specifically during the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament, or the United States military. Now, I wish to apologize to all service members because it's very likely you're going to get butt-fucked by my boy here, but let me break it down for you. First, we're going to power scale Tien, and then we are going to power scale the American military. Now, while I do specialize more in medieval and antiquity, I'm not the best at modern warfare, unless we mean Call of Duty Modern Warfare, in which case I'd win. I still know a bit and have done my due diligence for this video. But first, let's do the easy part. How strong is Tien during the final tournament of Dragon Ball before Z? Well, right off the bat, we need to acknowledge we will not look at any of the Daizenshuu power levels before Z. The reason being, of course, because they make absolutely no sense in terms of logic or feats or statements in the manga. In fact, let's do the most basic one. Goku apparently has a power level of 10, and we know from the manga that a regular human has a power level of 5, which means that Goku would be twice as strong as a regular human, but we also know that's not the case because he can shatter stone and he's stronger than a gorilla and stronger than the bear thief that he fights on the road, which was like a 13-foot tall. My friends call him PIB for poor innocent bear because for a while we would argue in a troll argument on that he did nothing wrong and that Goku beat him up unnecessarily, so we always call him PIB. But yeah, Goku with a power level of 10 could do far more than someone who would be just twice as strong as a normal man. Anyway, let's get back to Tien. So if you've seen my video on just how good is Tien, you know that the 23rd tournament, while Tien is not at his strongest, he is at his most impressive. Through mostly just training with Chaozu, he went from being slightly weaker than Drum to being stronger than young King Piccolo and nearly a match for Kami and Goku. The first being the god of earth, and the other not only having his potential unlocked from the sacred divine water, but also being specially trained for 3 years by Kami to fight Piccolo. That and Tien also learned how to do the multiform, an impossible technique only he can perform. Really, in that tournament, he gave it his all. But how strong is he in real-world terms? Well, it's hard to really describe. As we all know, Goku defeated the Red Ribbon Army prior to the 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament, albeit with a little bit of difficulty, to be honest. Now, there are those weaker than him, like Bora, who were bulletproof and destroyed helicopters with thrown boulders, and then we have Mercenary Tao, who killed Bora effortlessly, and Goku also surpassed him. Goku then training further and fighting in the 22nd tournament, only to be about as strong as a normal King Piccolo minion, to then being stronger than them from what was likely a Zenkai or Saiyan power boost, to then having his potential unlocked to fight a young King Piccolo, and with Tien's help, he won, and then Goku trained further after that. And if, like I said earlier, this training is special. Tien almost keeping up with all of that. Now you can say, oh, Mercenary Tao was beaten by a normal bomb, or oh, Tien was harmed by Cyborg Tao's knife. However, let's take both examples. First, Tao was not only beaten by the bomb after Goku had thoroughly beaten him up, which made him weaker, and of course more susceptible to damage, but second, the bomb did not kill him, as we all know. Even though that was the thing that finally beat him after Goku beat him up, that didn't take him out. And Mercenary Tao, or Cyborg Tao, stabbing Tien is a phenomenon I mentioned in my video where I talked about Future Trunks' sword, how it can cut through Mecha Frieza but not Android 18. People were like, oh, is there some property with the sword? We power scaling the sword? No, that's not how it works. A weapon is only as effective as its wielder, but it gives them a slight boost. So essentially, a knife or a sword, like Yajirobe's sword, is a regular weapon. However, if it's wielded by someone who is super strong, and this person's strength is comparable to another person's strength, you can then cut them. However, if the person you're fighting is far, far stronger than you cannot cut them with that weapon, and it will break like any other weapon. So a regular man with a knife won't do anything. A superpowered person catching Tien off guard can. But even then, when Tien was focusing, he simply catches the knife that Cyborg Tao tried to stab him with and just breaks it. However, we do acknowledge that Tien is multitudes stronger than Bora, who is holding off multiple squads of armed soldiers and helicopters, and he is stronger than King Piccolo, who could blow up an entire city with a wave of his hand, and who felt no fear against any normal military attacks. And while yes, people will mention that Roshi destroyed the moon, it's a very complicated thing. It's kind of hard to get into. The Kamehameha and his ultra-powered form, or like his buffed-up form, Roshi's buffed-up form, could have made it just strong enough to do that when normally it wouldn't be that strong. And plus, you don't have to engulf the whole moon or blow it up to make it disappear. You could just break it apart. But even then, that's also when Dragon Ball manga was still slightly in the gag state, so I'm not going to include that in this. I'm just going to talk about how King Piccolo just waves his hand and destroys cities, or King Piccolo saying like, I'm going to destroy an entire province of the world today. You know, he could just do that. So yeah, Tien is stronger than that. And it's difficult to tell just how fast Tien can fly or leap, but even Piccolo Jr. was impressed with his speed during his fight with Goku, and he could outpace Goku until he took his weights off. And of course, all Dragon Ball fighters can be much faster in short bursts than long-distance travel, even if they can go super fast long distance. And this is why I always think it's weird to power scale Dragon Ball characters against other shonen characters, because like, the stronger a character is, that doesn't mean the character's better. So I never understood why a Naruto fan would want to prove that Naruto can beat Raditz or Super Saiyan Goku or whatever. In this point in the story, we're not even at Raditz yet, and Tien wasn't even the strongest in this saga, yet he can destroy something like he's just tossing nuclear weapons like they're candy. Like, it's just, yeah, it's ridiculous. Now, let's power scale the US military. So, we are going to assume this is the United States military at its height, without years and years of sending Ukraine and Israel untold munitions, and without wasting all of those bombs in Iran. I will not get into the politics of it or my opinions on that. We shall save my opinions on that for a Q&A if someone is interested. Anyway, much like Tien, it's hard to conceptualize how effective the full might of the US military would be, particularly against a single superpowered target. Now, firstly, let's get this out of the way. Drone warfare is all the rage these days, but allow this Dragon Ball YouTuber to explain drone warfare to you. Drones would do jack shit to Tien. And that is honestly because drones aren't really that effective or advanced. The reason why drones are used so much nowadays and why they are effective in modern military operations is because 1, they are relatively fast, and 2, they are relatively cheap. A drone does the exact same thing as a missile, except worse. However, a drone is far, far cheaper. The United States uses predominantly Tomahawk missiles, which is why people know that that school full of Iranian girls that got hit by a missile was a US mistake, even though my country won't admit it, because it was a Tomahawk missile that did it. Now, a Tomahawk missile is usually about 1,000 pounds and can fly over 550 miles per hour and can travel about 1,000 miles. When it hits, it causes a crater 20 feet wide, and the fiery explosion around it, along with the shrapnel, is far larger than that. It can utterly destroy a large home. Multiple of them would be super problematic for a large ship. And by contrast, a suicide bombing drone explodes with far less force. However, you can make 100 drones for every Tomahawk missile, and even if they aren't quite as fast, there's so many it doesn't really matter. At least in terms of modern military operations. Unfortunately for the US military, more smaller explosions will not harm Tien. we should acknowledge that small arms fire, like the 5.56 times 45 millimeter NATO ammunition rounds used in an M16, would really do nothing to Tien. Hell, even if you got all 1,500,000 ground troops, hell, if you have one of them attack Tien with a knife, he's more likely to live because Tien will at least consider him brave enough to try. It's like that scene in Man of Steel. If you've seen the movie, whatever your opinions on Man of Steel, I think it has the best action a movie has ever given of what a Dragon Ball Z fight would look like. And there is this point when a soldier, I think he's a lieutenant, but he's badass. He takes out a knife and he's about to fight this Kryptonian. It's really cool. That would do nothing to Tien. However, Tien would respect that. But anyway, it's safe to say small arms in RPGs do absolutely nothing to him, since that did not help the Red Ribbon Army against Goku. Jets and missiles would be annoying, but they wouldn't be enough to stop Tien, and he would likely dodge almost all of them. And even if he could not outpace them long distance, he's certainly more maneuverable. Plus, it will be hard to pinpoint his location for the missile to even hit him. Now, I went over how effective modern tank armor is on my other channel when I did a breakdown on Space Marine Ceramite armor, because the 40k people, Games Workshop, designed the Ceramite armor to be like modern tank armor. The link for that video will be in the description below if you want to watch that. But that might give a soldier some protection from the fringes of a large ki blast from Tien if they are lucky. And while an M1 Abrams tank shell can travel literally a mile a second, if Tien is focusing, he could dodge it in all likelihood. Though catching him unawares could potentially wound him if he's tired. And this brings me to the main advantage the US military would have against Tien. At this stage in the series, Tien, while being superpowered, is still weak enough that if he is tired out, or caught unawares, preferably both, the more devastating weapons the US brings to bear have a small potential of wounding him. The problem is catching Tien, and the problem is tiring him out enough to where something like a jet or a Tomahawk missile that had a 0.2% chance of harming Tien now has a 5% chance of harming him. The more tired he is, the weaker and less protected he gets. But another big problem is Tien is small enough and fast enough to where even modern equipment might have a difficult time keeping track of him if he chooses to hide and rest. But yes, if Tien has dropped down in the midst of a bunch of troops that you're in, you're going to watch your unit get ripped to pieces, tanks and missiles or not. However, doing this over and over and over, or having missiles hit him directly non-stop, or a bunch of tanks hitting him directly non-stop, that could tire him out enough for him to eventually be susceptible to damage. Of course, Tien likely could ki and defend himself without getting hit at all, and he could also just tank it, he could also just tank a bunch of hits anyway, but with the ki like he did against Cyborg Tau Super Dodon Ray. And so, it would take billions of dollars of ordnance and countless lives, but if the US attack him with the same ferocity of GTA cops when you have a 5-star wanted level, the chance of beating him does rise a bit. Now let's talk nukes. It's extremely difficult to say how effective a nuke would be against Tien. There's a good chance it could seriously hurt him, or even kill him. However, there's also a good chance he could survive or it would do very little. There's really no way to tell. I would advise anyone on the Joint Chiefs of Staff watching this video to fight him conventionally first. Lose for a while, you're gonna lose people. He's gonna rip some heads off. You're gonna lose a bunch of tanks, you're gonna lose jets. But then, after tiring him out, you bait him into an area and launch multiple nuclear warheads. The typical United States nuclear warhead has about 100 kilotons of force. It would be my contention that after he's been hit over and over by missiles and tank shells and even small arms fire, fighting for hours or days, he would be more vulnerable to a tactical nuclear strike. Though I advise multiple since there's no telling if he can dodge the first one. Now, it is possible the radiation could kill him. I'm thinking of Hunter x Hunter, and okay, well, I won't go further in case you guys haven't seen Hunter x Hunter, but still, Tien could be vulnerable to radiation poisoning, potentially, but we really do not know how someone superpowered would react to it in the Dragon Ball world. However, if Tien is smart, and God forbid he has knowledge of United States infrastructure and base locations, he could no-diff the US military no problem. Pwned, wrecked, game over man, game over, the US military would have to be willing to trade thousands upon thousands of lives and tens of billions of dollars of equipment to even think about stalling him, and it would still not be guaranteed they could beat him. I give this to Tien after a lengthy, bloody, and honestly hilarious fight. Imagine if Tien showed up in our world and became friends with a few, Iranian people, and since they trade with India and he feels bad for what he did to Nam, he takes the fight to the US. I would pay. So stupid. That would be wild. I don't think Tien would ever use his tri-beam because really, he wouldn't really need to. It would tire him out too much. That would still threaten his life. He'd probably just be throwing a bunch of big ki blasts or ramming into people and things at top speeds. It would be a bloodbath. Good lord. Anyway, that's all I have to say today about this matchup. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember, my Patreon is below. I always appreciate comments and likes. Sharing would be great. And thanks again, guys. Oh, right, and I nearly forgot. What day is today?
Say it right to my face. You'll get knocked.